This is a guide to support you in your revision for GCSE history as well as other subjects that you are undertaking your preparations for. The title is Effective Revision, but there's no way to get around this simple fact. Revision isn't fun or quick, it takes a lot of time and it isn't easy. You need to be aware about how people tell you to revise, how other people want you to revise, but most importantly, you need to be informed about how you best revise. And hopefully your preparations that you've received both through the teaching of GCSE history and your other subjects at Plymstott School have brought you to the conclusion and awareness of what does and doesn't work for you. So myth number 1 about revising, the length of revision. This idea that I don't need to revise, I always do well in lessons, I will just cram the night before. There are always exceptions that prove that this might work, but the simple reality is that it doesn't work. Cramming is playing Russian roulette with the final results. If you revise the right stuff that comes up, you might just get lucky. We don't want our futures hinging on a simple roll of the dice. Exam fails are linked to people cramming and not taking things seriously. Effective revision is a long-term process. Your GCSE has been taught to you over 2.5 years, but the real groundwork in this revision for your exams has been a 5-year process. It is a long-term process, and that will yield results. Myth number 2 is that rereading notes is the best way to revise. Research has shown that rereading has inconsistent effects on student learning and that benefits are not long-lasting. It often creates reader fluency, as just as learning facts on flashcards. It's ineffective because it's passive. Passive revision is not effective. Revision must be active. If you reread a story, you will become more and more fluent in that story. It needn't be that you become a greater understander of that story. And chances are you will reread the start more than you will understand what comes later. Effective revision has to be active. Myth number 3 is highlighting your notes. It certainly looks from the picture to the bottom left here that you are more active than maybe previous types of revision that we have talked about. But students need to know, according to Professor Dunlowski, that highlighting is only the beginning of a journey. Again, it is reading simply with a highlighting pen. It is the start of something. It is largely ineffective. Color coding by category of information is a higher order of thinking. So for example, instead of just realizing that 80% of the text on a page is irrelevant and highlighting 20%, if you were highlighting by different category of information, for example, economic reasons, social reasons, political reasons, military reasons, these categories for compiling information that we are aware of that we have used in history, that becomes more effective because you are thinking on a higher level. And thinking on a higher level is one step further removed from being passive. You are being active. Myth number 4, an incredibly important one for the studying of history. Revision is all about remembering facts. Well, this is simply a myth. Knowing your history, knowing your facts will be great for playing Trivial Pursuit or great for a pub quiz. But you have to do more in history. It is more than just the facts. It is the application of knowledge to specific exam questions. It is knowing how to answer a question, how to deploy skills. And if you take a moment just to think, maths, for example, is a skill-based subject. If you can count, that's the only knowledge you need. Everything else is skills, the application of techniques like multiplication, division. But history, just knowing the information, will not do. You have to know it, you have to recall it, you have to be able to deploy it, and you have to be able to apply it to the specific requirements of the exam question. You must not lose track that simply knowing is enough. And of course, when one does get around to revising history, the easiest thing to do is simply to revise knowledge. It's quicker. But revision is hard work, and you need to practice the written side of answering questions, knowing how to answer them, and knowing how to decode a question. Myth number 5, incredibly important again to 21st century students in a world full of distractions. Listening to music helps me revise. It's nonsense. This is called the Mozart effect, and there was a time when it was believed that listening to music would aid you in becoming a genius. Mozart was indeed a genius. It is, however, been fully disproven that it is a successful revision aid. It is a distraction to the process of learning. You need, when revising effectively, to remove all music and personal devices such as mobile phones, iPads, consoles, all devices. They simply distract you. You think about locking yourself away in a room for 1 hour. How much of that time that you spend of that hour is genuinely proven effective revision? And it will only be a minimum. You have to maximize your attention span by removing distractions. These kind of technological interruptions in our learning are ubiquitous these days. You've had them there all your life, therefore you think it is normal. Take it from me, someone who's been through the process. Take it from the advice of others that have done the research. You can't revise with a mobile phone. You can't revise with earpods in and music blaring at you. It simply doesn't work. So, how to effectively revise in 5 stages. Now, you'll please note here in the top right-hand corner, our studies are based around the syllabus from Pearson at Excel. So, the materials that we are referring to here are all available on the GCSE shared area. They'll all be available on the Google Classroom for you to access, but we are referring to materials specifically for the Edexcel syllabus that we teach. So the 5 stages are as follows. You need to understand the exam syllabus content. That is the document that says what you can be tested on. Number 2, you then move from that first syllabus document to summarizing your own knowledge and creating your own revision notes. And again, I stress your own revision notes, creating them yourselves. It's work. Thirdly, revise. Go through the process of learning from your revision notes and then testing yourself. And then going back and forward and back and forward, revising and testing until you know it. Finally, practice the application of knowledge with exam-style questions, and then mark and identify your strengths and weaknesses so you can repeat the whole process again. Your GCSEs are a great opportunity, but I'm afraid opportunity in life often disguises itself as hard work. You have to overcome an unwillingness to put the time and graft in, because the only way in which you will succeed is through hard work. So, number 1, understand the syllabus content. This effectively is the legal document between you and the exam board. The syllabus will provide you with all the information that you will be expected to know. If it's not on the syllabus, you don't need to know it. Now, you should have access to the syllabus document, or you may find that your teachers have given you versions of the syllabus document, like, for example, the knowledge checklist that you have here. These will appear on each of the booklets that we use to deliver our curriculum at Key Stage 4 and at Key Stage 5 if you're watching this as an A-level student. We provide it in a table where you can rag or red, amber, green the content. Green means you're comfortable and you may only need to read through it once. Amber means that you are familiar with the content, but you'd rather hope that it didn't come up in the exam. And red is an admission that you do not know any of this. Therefore, the red column should be ticked as the bare minimum. And one would hope that that's linked to absence on your part and not something that you were taught and then you didn't understand and didn't do anything about. And once again, that illustrates the need to constantly work at your learning all the way through. So this is the knowledge checklist from the first booklet of the Germany course, taken directly from the syllabus. That's step 1. Know what you're going to be examined on. Number 2, expand your understanding of that content. If that is the basic content on the knowledge organizer, this is what it looks like after it has been taught to you. And departments that are organised should be able to summarise that knowledge in knowledge organisers. They can look in many different formats, many different styles, but they take those bullet points and they expand them. Now, for pretty unengaged and students that aren't working particularly hard, this might constitute your revision notes. The really engaged students, this will be a working document and maybe the basis for producing your own. Remember, these documents are produced by teachers in styles that work for teachers. You're the student. You've got to find a way that works for you. But every point in the syllabus has been expanded here. There are different ways to access this knowledge. Online resources like Bitesize, the History Learning site, GCSE Pod, or revision guides that you could buy from Amazon. There are lots of different types, and if you want to acquire some of these, by all means do so, but take a look at them. See if the way in which the work is presented is something that you will engage with. It's very sad when we get given revision guides at the end of year 11 by students who no longer need them and have clearly not used them. They're not cheap. So please, please realize that buying these alone is not revising. Using them is revising. You then need to move on, and you need to summarize that content in a way that you understand. So I, for one, I'm a sequential, linear learner. I like my timelines. I can sequence events in history in an organized way. So what you're looking at here on the right, this kind of big picture overview, that kind of appeals to me. To the left, at the bottom, however, you have a mind map, another way in which you may choose to get a big picture of the time that you are looking at. You'll see that both use colour, both use symbols and pictures. You've got to find what works for you. But the act of doing this, the act of thinking about this, is teaching yourself the content. You will be revising. You are being active. Simply picking up one of these that someone else has done, well, that's far nearer a passive learner. And we already know that being passive does not help you revise. Here are some other examples. Color-coded mind maps. Brief notes, bullet points. Other ways. Flashcards or linear notes pulled together in a booklet. Looks pretty, but the fact that the student has done it and invested the time in it means that they are an active learner. This student did it as they went through the course. When it came to revising, they actually realized that they'd done 80% of the work in their GCSE already because they'd been revising as they go. That hard work had actually paid rewards and paid dividends. Stage 3 is to revise and test. Effective retrieval practice, for example, using flashcards. Now, an interesting model here that we think is very effective and well worth looking at is this idea of placing all your knowledge on flashcards. Now, you can buy flashcards, but of course they won't be your own flashcards. But you can make your own flashcards as well, and you put them in a pile in one box. You test yourself on the content, and if you get it right, you move the cards you know and understand into the second box. Until at the end of going through the pile, you have two piles, those that you knew and those that you didn't know. Test yourself the next day on the content of the second pile. If you get it right a second day in a row, it moves into the final box. Now effectively, that final box, for the knowledge that you knew 2 times in a row, that becomes your green knowledge. That which gets stuck with you only knowing it once and in the middle box, that becomes your amber knowledge, and the knowledge that never progressed from the first box, that becomes your red knowledge. You keep repeating the process until routinely everything is in that final green box. When you've done that, we give an example of how you can test yourself. Now, there is online testing, but what you can do is use these materials that are on the shared area under GCSE revision. These are topics on a page with the key knowledge removed. If you know the stuff now, you can place the correct knowledge in the correct historical context. Here's an example of a topic on a page for the origins of the Cold War. If you know that knowledge, if you know the information and it's securely green or in that third box, you should be able to populate this diagram. We have these available for all of the GCSE topics. And ultimately, the real test of what you know is when you take a topic like Unit 1 of the Henry VIII course, and then you can populate a sheet of blank paper with all the information you know, literally removing the scaffolding that was apparent in the previous activity that we showed here. If you know it, you'll be able to fill that sheet out. How long should you revise for? How long is a piece of string? If you revise for 2 hours, your memory looks like this. High degree of concentration that then dips after around 40 minutes and only recovers when you've got the light of the end in sight. Now that's a best fit. For some people, myself included, there's no way in an hour I'd possibly be able to give 40 minutes worth of solid revision. I'm not able to do that. Consequently, I had to revise far more frequently, knowing that my attention span was that much shorter. So how long should you revise for? Well, again, you've got to find your own way. There is an argument that you break down your learning into 10-minute blocks. There's an idea that you then change subjects every 10 minutes. You've got to find what works for you. Now, this idea of breaking your subject down is what we call chunking. Instead of trying to cram one topic in 1 hour, try and break lots of topics down, mix them up and revise for shorter periods of time. Chunking is proven to be effective, highly effective with some people. And revise and test over long periods of time. First reminder, second reminder, third reminder, fourth reminder, and so on and so forth. There is a lot of revising to do. I'm only talking to you as a history teacher. I'm more than aware that you've got 8 or more GCSEs that you're studying for. It's a lot to do. With everything you've done there, you can now practice. Exam papers are already on the GCSE area for you to look at. You can look at previous exam papers. If you've got revision guides or the work booklets, there will be lots of other exam questions lifted from previous papers or written in the style of GCSE exam questions. You now have to practice. You can then mark and review. All the way through your GCSE in history, you have been marking and had marked work in the style of GCSEs using the mark scheme. Working your way through this, you will be able to identify knowledge areas that are all strengths and are weaknesses. You will also be able to identify skills and question styles that pose you problems. You pull these together, you have a 5-step process to effective revision. Understand the exam syllabus content. Understand what that looks like in terms of all the knowledge used in the knowledge organisers. Summarise that knowledge in your own style. Revise from it, then test yourself. When you're secure in the knowledge, practice the exam questions. When you practice the exam questions and mark them, identify strengths and weaknesses in both terms of knowledge recall and in terms of skill application. I hope this video has been of use. All the materials that referred to in this particular document, of course apart from the ones that you do yourself, are in the GCSE revision area on the school home learning area. Your teachers are always ready to help. But please, one more time, opportunity often disguises itself as hard work. The GCSEs are probably the hardest in terms of revision you will ever have to do. Best of luck, and find us if we can help.